Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar. My name is Magda Sochacka and at PCG Academia I'm responsible for cooperation with our partners that provide technology solutions to universities, Blackboard and Inspira among them. Please let me start by introducing our guests. Today with us we have Christian McCartney-Balmer from University of Northumbria. And Kristen serves as the manager for solutions for technology-enhanced learning at the university. Hello, Kristen. Great to have you here. And we also have Adam Els from Nottingham Trent University. Adam is the virtual learning platform business manager. Great to have you here with us as well, Adam. I'm really excited about this webinar because accessibility is an important topic that appeared on Polish university's agenda not so long ago. And we are still at the beginning, I would say, of the journey to provide equitable and accessible learning environment to students, especially in terms of removing of digital barriers and providing proper assistance to all students in need. And on today's webinar, we'll mostly focus on digital accessibility as well as policies and tools that may help universities in ensuring this digital accessibility. Both Adam and Kristen have agreed to share their experiences in introducing accessibility-related initiatives at their universities. And one of those initiatives was implementing Blackboard Ally, a tool built to help universities in enhancing accessibility of their e-learning content. I'll ask my guests about the benefits they have seen from the implementation, and particularly for key stakeholders, so the academic staff and the students. And our conversation is also important in the context of the EU funds obtained by many Polish universities for enhancing accessibility as part of the Power 3.5 Accessible University Initiative. Blackboard Ally is aligned very well with the goals of the initiative and can be financed from the program. And we'll dedicate several minutes at the end of the webinar to provide a short demo of the tool. The whole webinar will be held in English, but live captions in Polish will be provided throughout the webinar. And I encourage you, our audience, to actively participate in the webinar through asking questions on the chat. At the end of our discussion, I'll ask the most interesting questions to our guests. The entire webinar will be recorded and will be posted on PCG's Academia website several days from now. Also, I would like to use this opportunity and invite you to our next webinar from the University of the Future series. In exactly a week's time, we'll be talking about the benefits of analyzing data from e-learning platforms such as Moodle using IntelliBoard tool. And I strongly encourage you to tune in. So let me now turn to our guests, Kristen and Adam. Before we dive into questions, could you please briefly introduce your institutions and your role to give our audience a better sense of where you're coming from? And Kristen, if we could start with you, please.
Yes, of course. Hello, everyone. My name is Kristen McCartney-Balmer. I'm the Technology Enhanced Learning Solutions Manager at Northumbria University. My role is to implement learning and teaching systems and to ensure that technology and services are accessible and meet other university governance standards and legal requirements. So a bit of context about Northumbria University. It's located in Newcastle upon Tyne, and that is in the northeast of England. It has 4 faculties, 20 departments, around 1,600 academics, and about 32,000 students.
Thank you, Kristen. By a Polish standard, that would be a big university. I imagine it's a similar case in the UK.
Yes, it is.
And Adam, if you could introduce now yourself and your university.
Sure, not a problem. Hi all. My name's Adam Els. I'm the VLE Business Manager at Nottingham Trent University. I've been in post for about 2.5 years, but I've worked across the further education and higher education sector in the UK for almost 20 years now. I've always had a remit for supporting the development, implementation and take-up of digital learning solutions, more so the VLE, the virtual learning environment. I've had experience extensively of working with Blackboard, but also currently we use Brightspace at NTU, and I've had the pleasure of implementing Blackboard Ally at 2 institutions over the last 5 years. So I've got a lot of experience working with that particular solution. NTU, we're based in Nottinghamshire, in the heart, in the centre of England. We have 35,000 students across 8 academic schools. We're predominantly class-based, with less than 3% of our delivery taking place wholly online. We have about 2,500 academic staff, and yeah, that's a little bit about me and NTU.
Thank you very much, both, and I think it's time to dive into our discussion, so I'll move on to the first question. So why is accessibility important in the university context, and is it just about compliance, and what does it actually mean for our main stakeholders, so the students? And if we could start with you, Adam.
Sure. Yeah, it's absolutely, it's much more than just about compliance, and it goes beyond sort of content and systems as well. It's about a culture of accessibility, and it's about supporting individuals and making sure that, you know, students have a high quality learner experience. So it can be impactful on the reputation of an organisation. In the UK, or certainly at NTU, but we believe wider than this, that only 10% of students would make a disclosure that they have a barrier to their learning, be that a disability or a learning need or other challenges. But the reality is the figure's likely to be between 20 and 25%. And so we need to be proactive in supporting these individuals and the needs and the challenges. So in doing so, you then provide benefit and opportunity for others. So if you support access to materials, access to systems, you provide, you give students choice of how, where, and when they learn. That creates more opportunity. That improves the student experience and improves their satisfaction of the institution, which improves the reputation. So it's not just about a checkbox. It's obviously about supporting learners' individual needs. And I think that for me, there's a big culture piece here.
And Christian, if you could give us your perspective.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, I agree with everything Adam's just said. Accessibility is definitely not just a compliance piece for us. As a university, we're committed to providing an environment where diversity is not just sort of valued, but encouraged. And that means that we aim to provide equal access to opportunities and services where everyone is treated equally and fairly. So on a practical level, I suppose, rather than repeating some of the things Adam just said, we strive to design learning content using universal design principles. And that means that students aren't disadvantaged by accessibility issues and teaching materials. So, and for staff, it is a much better use of their time to design once for everyone, rather than having to provide multiple alternatives, for those who request it. And this works at the course level and is the responsibility of the course leader. But at a university level, an example would be, for example, we have enabled captioning on all of our video streaming services, rather than putting the burden on the academic staff to provide them. So that means students have the choice to see and use the captions based on their own learning preferences and feel much more supported in their learning.
Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, it's like from your responses and from like other events of this type, there is definitely the conclusion that accessibility is not something that only those offices for supporting students with disabilities should care about, but it's really, and work in isolation, it's really about the whole academic community being aware of what accessibility is and work towards improving accessibility at universities. And why have you decided to implement a tool like Ally? Was it isolated process or maybe a part of wider accessibility initiative at your universities? And Kristen, if you could continue, please.
Sure. Excuse me. So when Ally became available, I don't even know exactly when that was, but it's been, what, 4 or 5 years, Adam? Something like that. We thought, really, there's no good reason not to use it or implement it. So our implementation of Ally, ours was in 2018. It was part of a wider project to adopt the latest version of our virtual learning environment, or LMS. We use Blackboard Ultra. Luckily for us, it was perfect timing to introduce Ally and include it into the training and the rollout of Blackboard Ultra. Another driver for, we were just talking about, it's not just a compliance piece. However, that is an important area. And the EU Accessibility Directive was something that we needed to ensure that we were complying with. So it was a lucky coincidence that when we did implement Ally, it gave us a really easy tool for benchmarking the accessibility of our learning materials in our VLE. And it also helped us develop a roadmap of how we were going to meet those legal requirements.
Thank you, Christian. And Adam, what was the case of Nottingham Trent University?
Yeah, sure. Very similar, actually. That, accessibility was high on the agenda. We'd started to think about taking a strategic approach to addressing sort of the compliance challenges, but also, again, that sort of culture shift, working with a range of professional support areas such as digital technologies and library and support service teams and marketing, just to ensure that we needed a tool in place that allowed us, as Kristen said, to benchmark, because we needed something to support. I mentioned that that I've had the pleasure of implementing it twice. Firstly, in 2018 at Bishop Grosseteste University, where that was as a direct response to the EU and the UK legislation, and then again in 2020 as part of our response to COVID-19 and the pandemic. But we were already exploring it. We had to wait a little while for it to be compliant and compatible with our system. But also, I think at both institutions we had some resource capacity issues and challenges in being able to support some of those challenges that students face when they have these barriers to learning. And so bringing a tool like this in allowed us to support students better and provide, them the ability to access resources in alternative formats, and also staff to have an intuitive platform that's very easy to use, very informative, very little learning required, and allowed them to have a tool themselves to measure the compliance levels of their content.
Thank you, Adam. So I understand basically there were two drivers, and one of them really was compliance, but the other, of course, to better support the students. And I would say the same drivers work here in Poland, in that we also had to implement the EU directive, and it's part of our legal system, and that's something that Polish universities have to abide by. But also there is definitely the need to support students in Poland, both with disclosed disabilities and undisclosed disabilities. It's an important part here as well, because in Poland as well, those percentages of disclosed people with disclosed disabilities are rather low. But if you look at the wider population, you Adam mentioned 25% of students that do have some form of disability or some difficulties with learning, essentially, where initiatives around accessibility could help them. And so, that's actually what I wanted to dive into. So I wanted to ask you about the perspective of the end users. How does Ally support the teachers, and what do they find the most useful? I understand teachers are one of the parties responsible to actually ensuring the accessibility, and Ally provides some support to them. And is there also something that they maybe find cumbersome? And in those especially areas, do you have ways to support them? So I know it's a multi-layered question, but if you could respond, and Adam, if you please.
Sure. Yeah, Blackboard Ally supports tutors immensely. I mentioned the intuitive nature of the tool. It's very easy to use. It's provided in a familiar interface at the point of need as well. So the fact that it gives indicators when material is published to the LMS or the VLE So straight away they can see how the level of compliance and whether they need to take action. When to take action, very simple, just click the indicator. They then get an interface that again is quite familiar. It's very similar to other technologies that they may be using within the LMS. And it's not just a point of view of this needs fixing and this is how to do it. So even the step-by-step guidance is useful, but it actually goes deeper into the value and benefits in making those changes. So it educates the user. So they might not be that familiar. Some of these challenges are very technical. So working with headings, working with color contrast and things like these are going to be relatively new concepts and quite technical challenges. And so staff may not have a full awareness or understanding of how to make those changes, or that those changes were even possible or particularly required. And so Ally provides a tool that guides users through making changes and highlighting and emphasizing the importance and value in doing so, and the benefits of who making these changes will support in the sort of wider context. I think for me, I don't find that tutors particularly struggle with it. I think that the main thing is just that, you know, some of these issues are quite new to them. And so again, the way that they get around that is by embracing Ally and engaging with it, working through not just the fix, but also the education piece, the guidance that's in there. And I think from our point of view, some of the challenges is identifying the student use and exposing the other benefits on the teaching staff of the time that they will have saved by not having to, you know, create alternative formats for students, because the tool does that automatically. So I think there's a huge time benefit there as well.
Thank you, Adam. And Christian, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I think very similar to Adam, Ally does support academics. It very clearly highlights accessibility issues, and also then kind of walks you through how to fix those issues. I think talking to academics, what they found most useful with Ally is the course report. So what it does is it provides a really good overview of the entire course, not just the number of documents in the course, but the types of documents that they have in their course. So things like presentations, PowerPoints, Word documents, PDFs. And in that report, it lists the accessibility issues right there, and those can be fixed right within the course report. There's no need to then go off and navigate to that piece of material to fix it. I think in a perfect world, the documents would fix themselves, but unfortunately, we're not there yet. I think what Adam said was really important about the education piece with Ally, and I think the more you use it, it soon becomes very familiar what the accessibility issues are and how to fix them, and that leads to that understanding, so that when the next time you're creating, a piece of material, then you're creating it with accessibility in mind, rather than going, and thinking about it as an afterthought. So, for example, the next time you're creating a document and it has a table in it, then you think, right, I need to make sure that I've got headers in this table, or, I'm going to use this image or picture in my presentation. And you would have already learned from Ally that you need to provide alternative text as a description of that picture. So they're doing that as part of creating materials in future, rather than going back and doing it as a sort of second or separate activity. From the support point of view, our academic staff have access to specific training on Ally. Our TEL team offer helpful hints and tips. We have drop-in services where people can have a one-to-one with somebody who can help them with their accessibility. And we also have a TEL development team that offer a course makeover service, and that is putting accessibility at the top of the list there.
So you actually do provide support services in that you do some things in sort of for the academics, so they don't have to do it themselves in some cases.
To a certain extent. I mean, when I mentioned the TEL development team, the ones that do the TEL makeover service or the course makeover service, the take-up it's gaining ground, but it's also working with academics. It's not really just doing it for them. It's sort of teaching people to fish. so to
Yeah,
speak.
so it's basically equipping the academics with the tool like Ally to be able to kind of care for the accessibility part themselves. And also I understand the important part here is kind of raising awareness about accessibility issues that appear in the files that they produce, but also raising awareness about kind of like technically how to remedy those. And then once they do it once, twice, like for the third time, they're actually well equipped to do it with less assistance from the Ally part, but already kind of start building their content with accessibility in mind. Thank you. And also you mentioned reporting, and Ally does have a lot of accessibility reports built into it. So what insights you think this reporting provides, and like which of those insights are the most important? Yeah, if you could say a couple of words about that. And Christian?
Sure. Yeah, sure, no problem. So yes, Ally does provide reporting insights, and they can be used at every level of the organization. So from, let's say, a university perspective to faculty, department, and course level. I do want to stress, though, that hierarchy is about your VLE or LMS, not Ally specifically. So the reporting gives you insights into overall accessibility, as well as the most common accessibility issues. And that's really valuable because what it does for us as an institution is that it helps us target the type of communication and support that's required. So for example, let's say there are a lot of people using scanned documents as learning materials. So we can see that in the report, and then we can target the communication to try to decrease that kind of practice. For students, for their interaction, we have a very high engagement from our students using the alternative formats. So last academic year, students downloaded almost 500,000 alternative formats. And so far this year, in 2021-22, so end of September to about last week, I had a quick look at the report, and we had about 13,500 students who've already downloaded about 100,000 alternative formats so far this year. So it also then tells you how many of those they've downloaded. So I'll just quickly go through our top three. By far and away, tagged PDF is the most downloaded format by students. For us, it's about 70% of those downloads. And it's probably likely that PDF is a sort of very familiar term to students, and so when they see it, they go for that one. But what it does is it allows them to access any learning content on any device that they're using, for example, mobile phones. The next one is HTML, and that's just under 25% of our downloads. And the third is EPUB. So it is gaining some ground, but at obviously a much lower rate. So an example of a use case, I guess, something interesting, I guess, what we found is that students are part of this, I guess, project called Student Inclusion Consultants. And we had a couple review 2 departments in the university, and they reported back to the academic staff what they felt needed improving in terms of accessibility. But they also raised awareness to staff about how learning materials are presented and formatted. So what they did is they highlighted that text-heavy documents were very difficult to read and absorb the information. And they highlighted that the learning content, the layout of that, was just as important as the accessibility of the documents themselves. So they also reported issues around the language, where long and complicated sentences were used, especially in sort of directions or assessment briefs, needed to be simplified for better understanding. So that was a really interesting use case that was, really highlighted by students.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting to hear, especially about which formats are the most popular. And maybe to clarify for the audience, because I'm sure that not everybody is familiar with Ally and functionality. What Ally does, it allows students to download the content that lecturers essentially post on the platform within their courses in alternative formats. So let's say an instructor posts a PDF in their course, and then next to it an icon, Ally icon appears, and then a student can choose essentially from a number of formats, alternative formats, which one he wants to download. And yeah, as Kristen said, tagged PDFs and HTML files are at the top of the list as of the most popular, at least at Northumbria. And Adam, if you could add to this and talk about your experience from Nottingham Trent. So how do you use the reports? What insights do you find most useful, and also how students interact with Ally interact?
Yeah, thank you. Very similar to Kristen, actually, in that the top issues are the same. The most common issues in terms of OCR and scanned documents, lack of structure in headings, and also the type of formats, alternative formats that students favour. Again, the same, the tagged PDF, the HTML. I think some useful insights into ours. So again, we use the data in a very similar way. So at the organisation level, we look at those common issues, and that then influences the communications that we put out and the support that's in place and the guidance. And then also at a course level, we encourage actively our module leaders to go into the report to understand where they've got specific files that may be corrupt, that may not be as compliant as necessary. So you've almost got the sort of top-down view, and then also the the course level view. And we have used the reports to just to identify the fact that on our entire system of 2.5 million pieces of content, there are 2 files that are corrupt. So we could just go and find those files and either remove them or speak to the owners of them, and then that's the issue gone. Obviously, would have taken a very different approach if there was 22,000 of those of that issue instead of just the 2. But also, I think two useful insights to us, and one was learned at the time of implementation of Ally. So one of the first things that we did in sort of July, August 2020, when we first implemented it at NTU, was that you do a scan of the system, and that's all content, all material that's on the platform that's compliant with Blackboard Ally, or compatible with Blackboard Ally, should I say. And that gives you a bit of a starting figure and an understanding initially of the common issues and the sort of overall compliance level. So our starting point, which was generated for the academic years 2012 up to 2019-20, our figure was 55%. And again, that was looking at over 2 million pieces of content. So a lot of work went into trying to improve that last year, from obviously implementing Ally, promoting it and encouraging its use, to the work that we did in supporting during the pandemic. So module leaders were encouraged to engage with a learning designer and think more about their planning. And also we created some course templates that were rolled out that we implemented or introduced, things like web page templates that were wholly accessible before they were then released. And so over that sort of 12-month period, we managed to increase our average baseline score from 55% to 85%, which is a phenomenal journey in 1 year, but still work to be done to improve that. And then another insight from a student perspective was learned through the preparing for this actual event today, where Kristen shares her student engagement, and we've got a lot of work to do with students. We know that we've not actively promoted it enough. We've only had the system in for a year, and the focus has been on the accessibility journey of academic staff. So our usage and our take up at the student level is a lot smaller. I think we had something like 26,000 downloads last year, which Kristen will have got in her first 2 weeks of this academic year, I'm sure. So a lot of work to be done there, but we're in a great footing for that.
Thank you, Adam, for your insights, and I think especially those figures are really kind of eye-opening, because it shows you what can you do if you actually treat accessibility seriously in that, and you actually have insights into where you are. So you kind of, like you mentioned, you started with kind of assessing the as is status, and then you started improving. And I understand it wasn't like all done in one day, but it's a continuous process that will follow in years from now, and I think that's kind of like important kind of point to stress when we are discussing accessibility, that the journey really never ends. It's a continuous journey. But you mentioned implementation process, what you've done at the start of it, and could you talk more about the implementation process actually, and could you describe more like your implementation strategy, looking at communications, training, changes in the university's policy, and also what was the initial feedback from well, the main stakeholders, so the faculty and students. And Adam, if you could continue. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. The implementation is very straightforward. I'll bypass the sort of piece that we would do with Blackboard. Blackboard are very engaged with the project all the way through from the initial conversation to the point where it's up and running in your system. But actually within the institution, and again, I'll recollect the fact that I've done this twice in 5 years. Both implementations were very similar in that when we got to the point of actually enabling Blackboard Ally, with the nature of the tool, it might suggest that you'd be best advised to probably pilot it in a certain area and just get a bit of a sense for how it's going to be received. But we were actually confident that it was such a sort of non-intrusive to an extent type of tool. So from a student's point of view, you know, the only thing that they will see is their ability to download files in alternative formats should they be compatible. So we thought from a student point of view, you know, that's just one extra benefit. From a staff point of view, they needed to know about the indicators that they would then see once it was enabled, and then, you know, they needed to be informed early doors as to what those indicators meant and what they could do with them. However, I guess probably the fact that the first institution was probably at the scale where we would probably have, that would be the size of a pilot group at NTU, which is a much bigger organization. So learning lessons from the fact that we just enabled it at the first institution and that actually it was positively received. We got a few queries that we were able to quickly address. So again, mostly related to the indicators, the compliance levels, the course reports, and how to fix and what it meant. That we were actually confident that when we implemented it at Nottingham Trent, that actually we could still just switch it on and then support from there. But we did do a few pieces of activity before just switching it on. So we did some awareness raising campaigns, and that was part of the overarching accessibility strategy. So it wasn't just a campaign to say Blackboard Ally is coming, here's what it is. It was, again, trying to address that culture piece of, you know, accessibility is everybody's responsibility. You know, if we take it serious and we embrace our remit, that we can provide new and greater opportunities for improving student experience. And so at the first institution, we did some roadshows. We did, I was meeting with all of the sort of heads of department just to talk about what accessibility was and what it meant and what their responsibility was. Similarly, I did a course leader roadshow at Nottingham Trent, where I did sort of 5 or 6 events where 50 or so people attended, and we talked about accessibility in general, how it impacted on individuals, and talking about those metrics around, you know, those that make disclosures and those that don't, the types of things that are cause a barrier to individuals, and some of the solutions that are available to correct them, like some of the accessibility checkers that you have within your learning platform and within Office applications, and then we'd promote Ally from there. So we sort of whetted people's appetite for it, so that people were already asking about when does Blackboard Ally come in, so that at the point where we were able to implement it, we could just say, let's turn it on and almost let the system speak for itself. Talked before, very intuitive, very little guidance needed. We did produce some guidance. We did produce, again, an awareness campaign online to say it was here and now you can use it and here's what you can do with it. But actually, it was very well received, even just by following that process of you know, a little bit of a campaign beforehand, and then just enablement. And yeah, staff have responded really well. Again, we've got a lot more work to do with students, so we've got very little feedback from students as to what impact it's directly had on those.
Thank you, Adam. So I understand communication here is key, communication around Ally, and really having that like a communication strategy in place as well. And Kristen, what is your experience of implementing Ally? Was the process similar, or you approach it in a different way?
Yeah, so our approach was very, very similar to Adam's approach. I do know that other universities have gone through the piloting, and that's absolutely fine. I think for ours, our strategy really was just to switch it on. And that's what we did. We didn't pilot it. We just felt that it was a necessary tool, both from an inclusivity and a compliance point of view. So I mentioned earlier that we were moving from Blackboard Original to Blackboard Ultra. So we already had a full sort of communications and training plan in place. So it was fairly easy to just include Ally into that. So every academic was introduced to Ally, and they were provided opportunities for further training and support. As for policy, we didn't mandate or provide any expectation of a sort of minimum threshold for accessibility. We wanted people to get used to the product. And so, for example, we didn't say, your materials must be 100% accessible. We just wanted people to use the product, understand what it was there for, and we continue to monitor and target our communications and support where we need to. Feedback from students, I mean, we have had very positive feedback, and we have very high levels of student engagement with those alternative downloads. The feedback from academic staff is generally about actually having enough time to fix their content, but we just encourage small steps. So for example, one of the insights from our institutional report is that we have a high number of images without any descriptions. So if we can take this message to people and try to kind of get on top of that, one of the most common accessibility issues, then it is a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Kristen. Yes, well, definitely a continuous journey that needs to happen essentially, and is happening. And I would like to address one thing, because Ally does not work in isolation. It is, as you mentioned, connected to your LMS platforms, and it actually works from within the platform. And does your LMS itself support accessibility and teaching and learning strategies, and in what ways? So what is the role of LMS itself? And Kristen, if you could talk about that, please.
Yes, of course. Well, yes, I'm not entirely sure how we would manage without our VLE. It is the heart of our teaching and learning architecture. It integrates with our student record system, and all of our learning tools integrate with it for assessment, for video streaming, for collaboration, libraries, and so on. So it really is that sort of one-stop shop for our students. It also is where we use Ally, as you mentioned. And on top of that, we created, I think Adam mentioned it previously, about course templates. So in all of the courses in our VLE, we use a single template. And what we try to do is we try to embed accessibility in that template. So all the content that is preloaded is accessible, but we also provide guidance to our staff for support, almost like a bit of a tutorial or a checklist for building their course content in an accessible way. For students, the templated courses provide a consistent experience across all of their courses. So for example, they can find assessments in the same place in every course that they're taking. So because we want that navigation to be simple and easy to use, so that technology doesn't actually get in the way of the learning.
Thank you, Kristen. And Adam, how is it at Nottingham Trent?
Yeah, echoed. We couldn't be without ours. The biggest driver from our students is around consistency. and and that's with the VLE in place. You take the VLE away, and you've got an even more inconsistent and fragmented sort of experience, where you've got all these different platforms. Where do students know where to go? What are they supposed to be doing? How do they do it? Where do they get support? How, who are they working with? What's the deadlines? And so for me, the VLE pulls all of this together and provides a framework for learning, allows us, again, to deliver our course templates. So we've got a level of consistency across the group. Some of that consistency impacts on or is aligned with our accessibility framework and strategy. That we've got, services are integrated. So we've got a digital learning ecosystem that includes the VLE at the heart of it, but reaches out to probably 13, 14 other platforms that, again, if we didn't have the VLE there to stitch them all together, then students would be going all over the place looking for, things. And that takes their focus away from the actual learning, the content, the subject, provides a very frustrating experience for them. So even with the VLE, we're still getting a driver to use the VLE more consistently, so that students aren't having to learn the platform, learn the module, learn the structure. They know where to look for their assignment briefs, the contact details, the submission areas, that sort of thing. And the VLE plays a absolutely critical role in all of that and bringing it all together.
Thank you, Adam and Christian, because I'm, from what I know about how Polish universities use LMSs, VLEs, many of them use those platforms when they need to teach online, when they need to teach remotely, but at many universities, such platforms are not widely used for all the courses, and as I understand, that's the case at your universities. That's a central place that a student accesses to get information about the courses, contents, or submit the work, essentially. And tools like Ally make the more VLE is used, I understand that the more tools like Ally make sense, because then they can actually connect to the content, and they can be in the place where the content is distributed and actually work as content remedy tool. And without a VLE kind of as the pillar of the learning content kind of distribution and communication, it's hard to implement tools like Ally in the meaningful way. So if you could just confirm that that's the correct understanding of how it works.
It is. It's not very easy to use, or it's very difficult to use independently from a VLE, and it doesn't make sense again as well, because otherwise you'd be, putting material through a system just to look at compliance, and it's missing the bigger piece. It won't have all of those metrics that we talked about earlier to be able to understand the culture, the biggest challenges, and the support that's needed. So it's got to be part and parcel of the whole sort of user experience and learning ecosystem.
Thank you. So I would like to maybe dig a bit deeper into the why for implementing tools like Ally. We mentioned compliance, we mentioned supporting students, but more from the university perspective, do you think that Ally can actually support recruitment and retention at your universities? And Adam, if you could comment on that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably more indirectly than directly, from a recruitment point of view, shall I say. You won't see many campaigns, marketing initiatives, suggesting that, come to us because we've got Blackboard Ally, but accessibility actually is something that can impact on, again, I talked earlier about the reputational value of the institution. I once heard a stat, I can't attribute it to anybody, but somebody once told me that if you have a poor experience, you'll tell 5 to 10 people, whereas a good experience you might only tell 3, and that works better when you say it the other way around, actually. So the whole point around accessibility is making the experience more inclusive for everybody. And again, we've talked about the wider benefits to others in doing that. So I think for both retention and recruitment, if students feel more valued because their needs are being catered for more, then again, they'll have a better experience, they'll tell more people about it, and your institution will be all the better for that. Thank
you, Adam. And Kristen, what is your perspective on this?
Yeah, I think obviously very similar to Adam. Our university has a diversity monitoring project, and they have identified that a large number of our students come from a widening participation background. And that means they come from disadvantaged backgrounds or underrepresented groups that face barriers to higher education. So while they're with us, we don't want them to face additional barriers, such as learning content that isn't accessible. And I think Adam said it really quite well. You know, if you have a good experience, you might tell a few people. If you have a bad experience, well, then, you know, like all customers, I think students vote with their feet, and sometimes even on social media. So if we aren't providing, you know, a good student experience, and that includes inclusive education that they need, then they'll find a university that does.
Thank you, Christian. I think that's something important to think about and remember from the university perspective. I have two last questions. I think we still have time for those. So together with Ally, Blackboard provides universities access to Ally user community where universities can share their experiences, ideas, and ask questions. Are you an active participant in the Ally user community, and how does it benefit your university if you are? And Christian, if you could start with you, please.
Yeah, well, I'm actually co-chair of the European Ally user group with Claire Gardner from the University of Derby. So we are currently holding meetings every other month where colleagues from other universities and colleges come meet and hear experiences from other institutions where they are in their Ally journey, and, you know, questions around accessibility. Everyone's welcome, so please feel free to join us in November. It's on the 25th. Perhaps we can supply those details somewhere. But we'll be hearing about institutional reporting from Bangor University and New Buckinghamshire University. It's been a real opportunity to learn a lot more about accessibility from colleagues across the whole HE sector here in the UK and abroad.
And Adam, are you active participants as well?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I across two different institutions, I managed Blackboard, and was sort of the community itself was crucial for my own journey. I think I feel like I've evolved with VLEs over the last sort of 15 years or so, and the community was just the place to be connected with like-minded people, champions, experts, people the opposite end as well, so those that are a bit sort of maybe anti the VLE or struggle with it, and so that you hear more about multiple perspectives which then influence your work. We're not NTU don't use Blackboard as their main LMS, so I'm a little bit detached from that community. I do miss it. I try and sort of just keep a toe in there, but as a Blackboard Ally user, it was great to come back in and again re-engage with the European Ally community as well.
Thank you, Adam. It really, and Kristen, sounds like an important kind of forum for sharing experiences, and that's always helpful to not just go alone, walk alone, but have other people that kind of are doing the same journey, essentially. And finally, my last question is a bit more forward-looking. What does the future hold for you? Do you have any ideas how to further accessibility at your university? And do you see Ally as playing a role in that? And Adam, if we could start with you, please.
Yeah, Ally is instrumental in the future of what we're aiming for in this. We feel like we've made significant progress on the broader accessibility piece. You know, we no longer have people suggesting it's not their job. The time constraints, as Krista mentioned earlier, will always be a challenge, but I think that's where the culture shift is needed to almost say, you know, you've got limited time. However, you know, this is a legal requirement, and this is important, and this impacts directly on students and potentially a quarter of our students, if not more. So it's important, and so Allies already, as we've talked about throughout this event, has allowed us to you know, make small steps, change mindsets, provide a resource, a tool or support platform to allow people to learn in time, which again, we're now reaping the benefit of that in the creation of new content, in the purchasing of systems. So again, the institution culture's shifted so that accessibility is obviously important at the purchasing of systems stage. We've as I've mentioned earlier, 55% to 85% in a year. We feel now that a target for this year would be 90%, and that's again still only the content compliance levels on the digital system. But one of the strategies or initiatives that we've put in place this year to try and continue to improve that is provide an accessibility statement at the course level. So we had one at the system, talked about the compliance level of the system, where support could be engaged and what common issues were, but almost academic staff didn't have any ownership of that, or a very minute ownership of it in terms of, you know, their contribution to that score. So now we've implemented a course level score where we're asking staff to take responsibility for ensuring that they have a high compliance level at the course level. So they're looking at all of their content, they're providing support to students. The second piece is around, I think is an important one, and it doesn't get a lot of exposure, but digital accessibility for me is a skill that, a digital skill that students should have. So it's great that we're providing them a platform to be able to access alternative formats, but how much do they understand of accessibility? How much are their skills being honed? How much are they taking note of the accessibility tools and accessibility requirements of the materials that they're creating, so their written assignments and any other publications? So we're starting to think about how we can expose this more to students, how we can develop those skills in students so that they're ready for industry, but also, you know, if they're on a placement or if they're, you know, if they're doing work experience in the public sector, that they know that they have a duty to be providing responsible resources, accessible resources. So there's almost a two-pronged approach here, so to continue the journey from the accessibility with staff and the system, and also enhancing skills and awareness of students' accessibility. Yeah.
Thank you, Adam. I think that's actually a very important part of the topic, because we tend to think about academics, the lecturers, as the people that actually have the most job to do around accessibility. But it's really also, as you mentioned, making sure that the torch sort of is passed on, right? And when students actually get out into the real world from the universities, they understand what accessibility means, and also are part of ensuring that accessibility is there for others, and what they produce themselves is accessible. And Christian, what's your perspective and looking at the future and accessibility at Northumbria?
Right. In the short term, what we're doing is we are revamping our accessibility toolbox as part of an initiative to make technology easy or simple to use. In the medium term, we plan to take the learning that we discovered from the 2 departmental reviews I mentioned earlier around accessibility in our VLE. We're going to provide workshops for new academics to continue to raise awareness around accessibility of learning materials. In the long term, what we're hoping to do is provide every department in the university with an accessibility review through that student inclusion consultants project, and really kind of harnessing the power of that student partnership. We feel that that's going to be key in speaking to our academics. Ally is obviously going to play a key role in all the plans moving forward, because it supports academics and it provides a better experience for our students.
Thank you, Kristen. So those are all the questions I've prepared today. So thank you, Kristen and Adam, for your very interesting and insightful responses. We do have some questions from the audience. We are a bit short on time, but I'll read them out. So the first question is, does Ally only have a feature of checking documents accessibility? I understand that this is an LMS plugin for systems like Moodle. We will actually be addressing that in the demo that will follow, but no, Ally does a bit more than that. So, and Adam, if you could just in a couple of words maybe say what it actually does and what's from your point of view is most important.
Sure. Yeah. So it is an LMS plugin. It reviews compliant content, so your typical Word documents, PowerPoints, HTML pages, PDFs for their compliance. And then it looks at also at HTML pages. It can look at images. It can look at videos as well to see if they've got captions, depending on where that video is hosted. So they're the sort of main attributes that it has. in that ability to, and I know there's a question around, so for images, it's like alternative descriptions. It can help to try and generate one, but quite often, you know, the recommendation that it provides may not always suffice. So, you know, it can help with that.
Thank you. And also there is, so it supports academics. There is also the creation of the alternative formats, and then this reporting both at the institution level, academic, and the level of courses, so that we get insights into where we are with the accessibility. Yeah, so I think that's also in terms of the supporting the creation of alternative descriptions to graphics, because we have a question about that this is the most time-consuming part. So Ally supports academics into in that it identifies the files that don't have those alternative descriptions, and then provides information on how to provide such a description, and kind of example of what is actually a good description, but it doesn't do it for the person, right? So that's something that's still on the academic to do.
Yeah, it can't second guess what you want to portray through that image. It can give guidance as to how to write a good accessibility statement. But if you think of a chart, for example, that might have a lot of data within it, you know, the accessibility tool will probably provide an example to say, like, this is a chart, a pie chart, a graph, or whatever, but that's not what you want to get across through the use of that particular image.
Thank you. Thank you. So our time is up. So thank you, Christian and Adam, for your participation and very interesting insights. And also big thank you to our audience for being with us today. And I hope our guests provided with some food for thought regarding accessibility initiatives at your universities. And if you are interested in hearing more about Ally, please do contact us. You might also be interested to hear that together with Blackboard, we have prepared a pilot program for universities. And for 6 months, you can now test not only Ally, but a whole suite of Blackboard tools, but Ally as part. So you can find out more about the program on our website or through contacting us directly. And thank you again, and please now stay with us for a short demo of the Ally tool. And thank you again, and hopefully see you next week. And big thanks again to my guests, Christian and Adam. Thank you so much.
Thank you. No, thank you.
Thank you.
Dzień dobry. Teraz pokażę Państwu, w jaki sposób Ally pomaga w poprawie dostępności treści cyfrowych umieszczanych na platformie Learn. Wykładowca Pani Dorota wchodzi w swój kurs Kulturowe uwarunkowania biznesu. Otwiera pierwszy moduł i na stronie treści znajdują się różne elementy, treść, dokumenty. Przy każdym z tych elementów pojawia się ikona dostępności. W tym przypadku przy dokumencie Kulturowe uwarunkowania biznesu ikona ma kolor czerwony i po najechaniu na nią widzę, że ocena dostępności tego dokumentu jest niska. Po kliknięciu na ikonę widzę, że została ona oceniona na 30% i jego główny problem to to, że zawiera obrazy, które nie mają opisów. Mam dostępny też podgląd dokumentu, gdzie zaznaczone są elementy, których problem dotyczy. Ally wyjaśnia szczegółowo, co to oznacza, czym jest opis alternatywny, dlaczego warto go zamieścić i dla kogo jest to najbardziej istotne. Umożliwia odnalezienie obrazu, bo po obrazie nie da się czytać, a po jego opisie jak najbardziej. Ułatwia zrozumienie treści, no i oczywiście umożliwia odbiór studentom niedowidzącym. Z tego miejsca mogę bezpośrednio przejść do naprawy problemu. Ally poprowadzi mnie przez szczegółową instrukcję, jak to zrobić. Widzę informację, w jaki sposób ten opis dodać, a także również podpowiedzi, jaki opis będzie najbardziej pomocny. Ally podaje mi różne przykłady, które uczą, jak pisać bardziej dostępnie. Teraz chciałabym jeszcze zobaczyć, jakie inne problemy dotyczą tego dokumentu. Otwieram listę i widzę, że mamy tutaj również problem braku nagłówków. Tu również Ally poprowadzi mnie krok po kroku, jak ten problem naprawić. A także drugi problem, jaki został zidentyfikowany, to problem z niewystarczającym kontrastem. I tutaj też informacja, co to oznacza. Widzę podgląd, których elementów to dotyczy, a także instrukcja. Z tego miejsca oczywiście mogę bezpośrednio nowy, poprawiony dokument wgrać i dostępność mojego materiału się poprawi. Podsumowując, w zależności od tego, jaki problem został zidentyfikowany w oryginalnym dokumencie, wykładowca będzie miał dostępne odpowiednie informacje zwrotne i oprócz informacji odnośnie poszczególnych elementów na kursie, wykładowca ma również dostępne informacje dotyczące dostępności całego swojego kursu. W narzędziach kursu dostępny jest raport dostępności wszystkich materiałów umieszczonych w tym kursie. Składa się on z wykresu, gdzie widać, jakie typy treści zawiera ten kurs. Tutaj widzimy dużo obrazów czy dokumentów Word. Informacje, które treści wykładowca może najszybciej rozwiązać i też które treści są najniżej oceniane, więc może warto od nich rozpocząć tutaj poprawę dostępności kursu. Poniżej natomiast znajduje się lista problemów związanych z dostępnością zidentyfikowanych w tym kursie. Mogę je sortować według wagi lub według problemu. Druga zakładka tego raportu, treść, pokazuje widok wszystkich materiałów posortowanych względem ich poziomu dostępności, przy czym najmniej dostępne znajdują się na samej górze. Można każdy z tych materiałów zobaczyć, jakie są w nim problemy związane z dostępnością i od razu go naprawić. Jeśli chodzi o drugą funkcjonalność, która jest skierowana dla studentów, ale jest też również dostępna dla wykładowców, to formaty alternatywne. I tu pokażę na przykładzie tego samego dokumentu. Tutaj proces będzie dla studenta podobny jak dla wykładowcy, czyli student wchodzi w swój kurs, w swoje materiały, odnajduje dokument, z którym ma się zapoznać i może go pobrać w formacie oryginalnym, ale może również pobrać właśnie go w odpowiednim dla siebie formacie alternatywnym. Ally generuje dla dokumentu w formacie Word następujące formaty alternatywne. PDF ze znacznikami będzie odpowiedni, gdy na przykład korzystamy z czytników. Generalnie PDF ze znacznikami ułatwia nawigację po dokumencie, czyli łatwiejszą mamy pracę z tym dokumentem, ale też co ciekawe pozwala na zmianę tempa odczytu w przypadku, gdy student chce ten materiał odsłuchać. Format HTML jest to najbardziej responsywny format, który pomoże nam odczytać materiał w dowolnej przeglądarce, na przykład na urządzeniu mobilnym również. I to jest dzięki właśnie responsywności, ta treść dopasuje się do wielkości ekranu. Format EPUB jest to format, w którym zapisywane są książki elektroniczne i pozwala on nam na skorzystanie ze spisu treści, na tworzenie notatek, co jest bardzo wygodne, podkreślanie tekstu, pracę z tym tekstem, ale także zmianę na przykład koloru czcionki, czy rozmiaru czcionki, czy koloru tła. Format elektroniczny Braille jest to format skierowany dla studentów z niepełnosprawnością wzroku. Będą oni korzystać z urządzeń braille'owskich i jeżeli pobiorą materiał w tym formacie, będą mieli możliwość odczytania go na swoim urządzeniu, będzie miał on logiczną strukturę i będzie właśnie możliwy do odczytania czytelny dokument. Format audio odczytuje na głos tekst z oryginalnego pliku, obejmuje to również alternatywne opisy obrazów, o ile są dostępne. I chciałabym teraz zaprezentować krótko przykład takiego dokumentu formatu alternatywnego audio.
Początek tekstu akapitu. Kultura organizacyjna i jej znaczenie. System kulturowy.
Także oczywiście jest to nie odczyt maszynowy, ale jednak zupełnie zrozumiały. Ally proponuje nam jeszcze tutaj format czytnik Beeline. Jest to format, który zapewnia łatwiejsze i szybsze czytanie tekstu na ekranie oraz tłumaczenie. Tłumaczenie maszynowe na wybrany język, jeżeli język oryginalnego dokumentu nie jest językiem ojczystym studenta. I tutaj mamy możliwość wybrania języka, w którym chcemy ten materiał pobrać. Dziękuję bardzo za uwagę.